Welcome to this informational webinar on the ASP. We have a lot of new members. I don't know how many of the people that are viewing currently are new members, like recently within the last 2-3 weeks, or if you've been around for 6 months or so. So this is the first webinar that I've done to kind of introduce the party to people and try to give an opportunity for you to have some questions answered live, and so that you can have follow-ups if necessary. And if you saw my screen share, I kind of outlined what I want to talk about. So the first thing is what I call the big three. And I actually had a talk way back at the last convention in September that I will send out as a link. It's uploaded on YouTube. And I talked to three big thinkers in our, basically the big three circles of ideas that we intersect on. I mean, people in the American Solidarity Party come from all kinds of philosophical bents. But I would say that there's an intersection of three major ideas. And the first one is the consistent life ethic. I think most people, you know, if you wanted to shorten that up, it's that we believe that in the dignity of human life from conception to natural death. And that the care of human life and its dignity, it doesn't have to only do with what people sometime in the pro-life movement say, you know, sticks with like abortion, euthanasia, and assisted suicide would be the things that a lot of pro-lifers say, well, that's what pro-life is, nothing else is pro-life. And in the American Solidarity Party, we would say that a consistent life ethic says no to that, and says that if we allow, you know, smearing of human dignity at any level, then it causes great concern for all of our objectives in amplifying human dignity. So that's the first thing I would say, that if you're new and that is something that, you know, resonates with you, then you're going to find a home here. We have a lot of people that would say that's the one thing that brought them to the party, like the big thing, let's say. You know, and people have different big things that bring them into the party. And, you know, we want to make everyone welcome. We want to kind of use your energy that makes you most comfortable. But that's one big thing. So the second one is Christian democracy. And this is one that often, you know, causes maybe some fear, some consternation in people because of the wording. And it has to do with a little bit of our American educational system. And I'll give you a side story. My son is a sophomore in high school, and in his government class, they're discussing politics. And I said, oh, you know, what are they talking about? And he said, oh, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives. And I said, well, what about third parties? Are they talking about, you know, I didn't, you know, he knows I'm the chair of the American Solidarity Party, but he's just a sophomore, and he's not really someone that is a very confident, you know, outgoing student. So he goes, no, he didn't really talk about other parties. And it was just really interesting, you know, to see how my own child in the school setting did not get kind of a well-rounded information on politics. I mean, kind of the prevailing duopoly attitudes of liberalism versus conservatism, and however the teacher described those things, you know, it was very, it wasn't very deep. It was kind of like the hot button issues and what, you know, what a typical liberal or typical conservative without nuance would say. So, he didn't hear about Christian democracy for sure, but most people haven't. So Christian democracy has a rich history, mostly in Europe, but also in several countries around the world, in Latin America and so forth. That, you know, goes back to its roots at a time when there was this kind of battle occurring between the industrial revolution capitalism in Western Europe, and then the rise of socialist thinking kind of more in the East, where, you know, after Marxism had gotten out. And so, you know, in separate worldviews, and in both Catholic and Protestant thought, there was this discussion of, well, neither of these philosophies of just laissez-faire capitalism or statist socialism really fits the Christian ideal. And the major principles that are outlined in Christian democracy are not necessarily Christian. You don't have to be Christian to appreciate them. And so a lot of people have come to the party because they do know of Christian democracy, or they've heard the principles and they think that they are sound. So the principles basically, come down to personalism, which is basically an outlook that says that an objective of the state is to try to ensure the flourishing of the human person. And the things that hold back from that flourishing would be unjust. Okay, so famous personalists would be Pope John Paul II, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., just to name a couple of big time people who personally, to themselves, they espoused the idea of personalism. So that would be one major concept that isn't necessarily Christian, but it certainly is appealing to many people. The next thing would be just the term solidarity, right? We're all in this together, as the song lyric. What is that song? Some kind of teen, feel embarrassed. My kids probably know this, and they would laugh at me if I didn't know the name of this song. But we are together in this, and we are. One of the things that is a Christian concept, but it doesn't have to be, is that we want to love our neighbors as ourselves. We feel called to that. That's a Christian ideal. But I think people who are communitarian, that feel like community is a very, very strong part of what makes us human, appreciate that, is this idea of solidarity. When a lot of us get together, we will feel more energized because the personality, our personalism is more strengthened when we work together in family and in community. So that's the idea of being in it together. Subsidiarity is the idea that government, or just any kind of organization that can be taken and money can be distributed, power is distributed to the level that's closest to where it's going to take effect at the most just state. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean small government. I think sometimes people think that, small government is just automatically better. Well, not necessarily. Sometimes you need the power of federal government to get things done. No one's going to argue in this party that we don't need a military and that the military should be run at a citywide level, right? The federal government needs to control the military, for example. And there's other things that are much more appropriate at the local level. And so you can discuss those things, but that we should always be looking to get things down to the lowest possible level while not having anyone, suffer needlessly. And then I was just talking to someone mentioned that the term sphere sovereignty is a little bit over the top, and that they suggested people just look into Abraham Kuyper as Kuyperianism, or Kuyperism. I don't know, I'm not sure which the term is, but it is a philosophy basically that the different spheres of life, education, healthcare, business or whatever, they really have their own structures, and that the state should only get involved in the different spheres of life as necessary to maintain justice, but that the flourishing of those things is best left to the authorities themselves. And then that might not be the complete best interpretation, but to me that makes sense, and I think a lot of people appreciate that. So those are the principles of Christian democracy. And people ask, well, why do you call it Christian democracy? Isn't that going to turn people off? Why use the term Christian at all? And to some extent that may be true, but if we keep explaining, keep teaching people, we have a lot of terms that we need to overcome in this country. And as a party, that is part of as a third party to educate people. We have a voice that we want to get out there to kind of break through what the Republican Democrat duopoly is, the narrative that they're trying to do. And so, for example, I've been fighting people all week about the term socialism, that there's so many people that think that literally anything the government spends money on now is inching us closer or throwing us headlong into Venezuelan socialism. That's a common one that comes up. And so Christian democracy is a historical term. It refers to something that clearly you can look up on Wikipedia and learn a lot about. And it has a rich, rich depth to it, both in terms of historical specifics, but also philosophical points that people can learn about. So, we don't shy away from that, and we invite people to look into it. So that's Christian democracy. And then the other part of the big three is the economic concept of distributism, which I've learned a lot about recently, but I am far from being an expert about it. I think the easiest way to discuss this concept, to me, the example I commonly use when people haven't heard about it at all, is that it's an economic principle, and so like socialism, it should be where the workers completely have control over the means of production. But in essence, in any state that's kind of really gotten fully thrown headlong into socialism, the state just takes over, right? I mean, and the state should be the people, but oftentimes through corruption and other issues, the state doesn't remain in the hands of the people. And so then we have this, the negative turns that socialist states take. And then in capitalism, capital controls the means of production. So basically those with money and the money almost itself acts as a like the corporation, for example, controls how things are done, and the workers, they get paid. And a lot of times people will say, well, I mean, people get paid really well. I mean, we're doing really, really well in the West and compared to socialist countries. Why is that unjust? And I think one of the things that a lot of our fundamental problems come down to is that what really the most just state would be that people, workers would ideally, going back generations, would be people owned farms and they controlled the means of their own production, and whatever they made, they lived on. There was the community sharing and things like that, but there was a dignity for a family to do the work on their land, have ownership, have agency, and enjoy the fruits of their labors. And so now we've moved way past that. I mean, I understand that a lot of times people will say, well, we're way, way into the industrial age and we can never go back. I'm not advocating, and I don't think anyone, really, really advocates a return to a complete agrarian world. I mean, it's just not feasible. If we want to be serious in the political realm, we have to kind of understand that reality is gone. I mean, maybe in small spheres in certain regions, people can find that kind of peaceful life, and maybe we should encourage it. But in terms of what is the solution to the entire country, we should have an answer. And so what we would say in distributism is that we should have worker co-ops, for example. Why are there stockholders who own, stock in a company, and then the company's the first people they answer to are these faceless stockholders that don't ever come to work, right, in the company. They most time they don't even show up anytime at the board meeting or whatever. They just own stock, and they're making money off of the labor of people who are waged employees. And so many people have made the suggestion that employees, even at corporate levels, should be part owners, and that by moving the ownership from stockholders to the workers themselves in the company, you would increase not only the agency of the workers and their dignity, that they're actually part owner in the company, and then so they control the means of their production. They get to vote on how the corporation works. They can create systems where the jobs can be more like recession proof. An example of this, I mean, so people say, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, companies can't run like that. Well, there are a lot of worker co-op companies, and there are corporations. The Mondragon Corporation in Spain is one of the largest corporations in the entire country that has multiple different divisions of production, and they make all kinds of things. And they basically work under a distributist philosophy. So to say that it can't be done is nonsensical. It is being done. To say that it's difficult to discuss and to explain, yeah, that's true. It is. But again, we feel like that kind of fits in with our other philosophies about human dignity and how people flourish, the idea of personalism, right? If you own what you're working on, the means of production, that it's going to make you a better worker, a better citizen, be able to have stronger families, build stronger communities, and so forth. So that kind of gives hopefully a really quick glimpse, and it wasn't that quick. I mean, I'm a teacher by trade, so I could sit there and just kind of talk about stuff, forever and ever. So let me go to no one's really put up a question yet. If you're following in the webinar, there is a feature that should allow you to post a question in the Q&A section. So if you have any questions about any of that stuff, I will see that come up at some point. I'll look back down. Oh, and someone is. Okay. So this is from Jack Butler. Okay. What types of legislation can be passed to move to a more distributist worker-owned corporation? In Milwaukee, we have a few employee-owned companies, meaning employees own most of the stock share. Is there a difference between this and co-ops? I don't know the ins and outs specifically of how those kind of companies are structured, but yeah, that's great. And the legislation, just off the top of my head, the things I've seen as discussion. So if you think of the corporate tax that was dropped down in the last, recently, a couple of years ago, corporations were taxed at a higher tax rate, and then that's about a 10% drop. I think we're down like 15 or 10%, depending on what was last passed. And one kind of legislation that would have possibly helped is because what happened there, right? The stock market is going crazy right now, and all of that money that was freed up is being priced into the stock shares. So stock prices are going up because a lot of companies, instead of raising their employees' wages, bought back stock shares, right? They just, whatever the free stocks were, and that just drove the share prices up, which made their stockholders richer, but necessarily didn't make companies stronger. I'm sure some benefited, some wage earners benefited, but why not have an incentive in legislation that says, if you want to decrease your, for every 1% of your revenue, right, that you're going to get back from a tax break, for every 1%, if you put so much into your company's, your employee stock plans, or making them owners, like just transferring, you might get a tax benefit. Okay, so those incentivizing this thing instead of being punitive. Some people even have said be a little punitive, raise the taxes. I'm not taking anything off the table, but that, if you incentivize that kind of process, or if you can move to that, it just makes, like I said, employees more, have more dignity and have more power in the workplace and control over the means of production. So thanks, Jack. Okay. So Holly asks, what is ASP's position on gun control? Which is a great question, and we get this a lot. And so if you've looked at the platform, you see that we don't take a platform position on gun control. So, does that mean people, like the party overall doesn't have a firm position, or like individuals in the party don't have firm positions? No, people do, right? One of the things about the party is that people are coming from different, political backgrounds. And so one of the reasons we didn't take in the last platform, I wasn't part of the process, but I understood where the decision process was to not take a stand one way or another, is that basically because of how gun control has been discussed in the media, I suppose, between the two parties, it's always been a contentious thing, and it always pops up when we have unfortunate events. And I mean, any gun violence is an unfortunate event, so I don't want to put it that way, but it's more when you have like a mass shooting of some kind of school shooting, the shooting in Las Vegas, for example. And well, a lot of us, I mean, I think that if the ASP had a, you know, consensus position, right, not a platform position, but something that we kind of all agree on, is that gun violence obviously is horrible, and the majority of it, what is also very bad is that the majority of gun violence just goes non-discussed, right? So the whole political discussion about gun violence comes down, or even gun control, comes down to these small occurrences that are only a fraction of, and if we're talking about deaths, are only a tiny fraction of the deaths that occur in a year. So what about the thousands of people who are shot in the inner cities and the thousands of suicides that occur in a lot of time rural areas, you know, or economically depressed areas? You know, those kind of go unreported. And so what we have consensus on is that that should be, if, you know, if we ever get to a platform position, that would be something that we could definitely concur on and say that what are the root causes? I mean, so, you know, mass shootings, inner city violence, suicides, other like domestic violence with guns. I mean, a lot of those things come down and could be alleviated with our positions on human dignity, personalism, distributism, you know, getting people economically engaged so that these outbursts of violence that occur because of, you know, people's, it could be mental health, right? A lot of times in those mass shootings, but, you know, a lot of the other things occur because of economic depression. And so that's where I would go with that. I don't know if that really answers your question, since, you know, you can't read that anywhere, but I'm just telling you what I've seen and I think is a major consensus. All right. Thank you, Jack. Jack gives me a thanks, so I appreciate that. I'm showing here. All right. So Shane says, are antitrust and anti-monopoly legislation on our agenda? Successful companies, like you're saying, are best. Yes, but, you know, I think that's a great question. A lot of times we spend a lot of time discussing, oh, you know, this is on our, like, what should we talk about? Big policy, big ticket things. And I think those are great topics for discussion. And I think for a party that really wants to, you know, move into being more active as people running for office and so forth, you're gonna have to create these kind of white papers, you know, on what we want to do, and explanations of our policy coherent with the platform. But like, I think for me, you know, as in the chair position, even though like I'm kind of in the coordination position, I would say, you know, I think someone said that kind of question's above my pay grade. I mean, you know, in terms of our legislative agenda, I mean, we don't have that many elected officials to have a legislative agenda, but it's a great topic to, you know, have people discussing and thinking. There is a group that has been discussing it's called like the Pelican Policy think tank or something like that, and we should have that posted somewhere so people can get to it. All right, Ernest, considering the difficulty of educating people of Christian democracy principles and philosophy, are there efforts to being joined forces with other groups and party? Yeah, I mean, people, if you ever hear of anyone, any group or anything that is similar to what we're doing, you know, always reach out to them. I mean, I'm constantly, you know, on social media trying to make connections with people that I see posting things that are remotely sympathetic to what we espouse in the party. So there's always that process of like trying to reach out, make connections, and team up. You know, we became a member of the Consistent Life Network last year. So we're enumerated with dozens or hundreds of other groups that strongly believe that human life has dignity in all of its stages. So that's like one place where we reached out and found common ground. A lot of those places are not political groups or parties or anything. They're just you know, subgroups that are against the death penalty, for example, pro-life groups and so forth. But yeah, I definitely would encourage anyone to reach out if you see writers that are writing about things we're sympathetic to, professors that teach about it, you know, definitely something of that nature would be great. Okay. All right. I'm trying to go around and get everybody some access. Actually, I want to make sure I get through everything. I don't want to keep you guys here all this year. So here we go. How are we doing? Okay, ballot access I'm going to talk about. So Eric, I see that question. And then we get more ballots and some more questions. So let me actually go to the things that I wanted to cover that are really, really common, frequently asked questions. And I know there's other people that have questions. Voting membership. Okay, so for voting membership, the National Committee voted that anyone who donates even 1 cent once a year is considered a voting member. And we did that really realistically to kind of show any kind of commitment. If you put a slight barrier up there, you don't get trolls, right? You don't get people that are just going to sign up because it has, you know, they can make a fake email and a fake name and join. This just kind of puts a little bit up there. And then we also have an opportunity if that's a hardship or, you know, for volunteers, you know, there's a process for that. But realistically, no one has had a problem. Most people give generously, you know, $15, $25 or more in the voting process. So then what does your voting membership get you? And that's an important thing. As we're coming up on a next election season, well, for the major elections, obviously for the country, a primary season coming up, but for the American Solidarity Party, we have our own election season coming up. And so the process I want to talk about first is the delegate convention. So in the end of June, we're going to have a delegate convention where we will first, in May, elect people from probably, and again, it hasn't been 100% decided, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be like the last process, which was we had 4 zones, north, south, east, and west, with the states put into those 4 zones. And then we had some people that are like in Puerto Rico, for example, or Guam, that were added, I think, to the south zone. And people in each of those zones will have the opportunity to vote for delegates to represent them in this convention. And this year, the first time, we actually allowed people to run for delegate, which will again, anyone can run, any voting member can run for delegate. And we'll have more of these Zoom webinars so that delegates can get together and in kind of a town hall format for hopefully the people in their region, but it could be for anyone that gets into the Zoom webinar to ask questions, and they can present their ideas for what they want to do as delegates. You know, how are they going to represent their constituents in the convention? And the main task of the convention this year is going to this June, in the June convention, is and always will be, to elect the new members of the Solidarity National Committee. Okay, so there are 9 members on the National Committee, and I'm the chair. And what we do is once a month or so we get together and vote on kind of the general day-to-day running and mission of the party. And so, you know, we'll be doing a lot of voting on how the delegate convention is going to work, and funding issues for ballot access. Someone asked a question about ballot access, but like just in general, ballot access, if you haven't really looked into, you know, any ballot access at all, you know, or beyond your state, every state has different rules for how their own internal voting occurs in November, in November, or even the primary as well, but we're not going to be in any primaries. So, you know, the number of electors that are needed for your candidate to be on the ballot, how much money it might cost, it might be a fee, how many signatures you need to cross a threshold so your candidate can be on the ballot. And so that's different in every state, every single state. So we do have professional services that we were looking into to help us with several states. Some states are easy enough to get a small number of signatures signed. And, you know, like I hope to do more of these to get the word out. The more volunteers we have, and we just don't have enough volunteers to go around and get signatures in a lot of these states. Like my state, I live in Illinois. You need, I think it's 2% of the last gubernatorial election in signatures, which is hundreds of thousands of signatures to get an independent candidate on the ballot. So, you know, we'll be looking to be write-ins in, and then in Illinois, you have to go county by county to the county clerk and sign up for ballot access to have your write-in vote counted. Everyone can write in, but they will only specifically count votes where you've gotten that paperwork done. So I mean, just kind of the nightmare that the duopoly creates to keep people like us out of their way, basically. So that is one of the things that the Solidarity Committee, National Committee does. So we call them the SNC, rather than, used to be called the NC, and then lots of things were NC. So we're trying to change that culture, but we, you know, just try to get the money handled. In the old days, a couple of years ago, the National Committee had pretty much all the power in the party, and we've moved the power over to this delegate convention. So the delegates will elect the National Committee for next year. There will be 5 open seats for the National Committee. 5 of us are completing our 2-year terms. You know, what you'll see pretty soon, not only will people be interested in running for delegate, they should also be making their interest known to be on the National Committee. So, you know, a lot of times people say, well, what's the commitment? What do I need to do? It's the commitment. You know, if memory serves me correctly, there were people that were that would quit on the National Committee because the commitment got too hard and the orders wouldn't do anything. I mean, you know, it's not like it's a paid position. You know, no one's going to fire you. It's a possibility you could get voted out, but you know, ideally the commitment should be coming from you. I mean, you should have a passion that you want to help this endeavor. And like I said, a lot of the things are technical aspects, right? So if you're a really strong money person, if you have an experience in accounting or fundraising, those are great assets for the National Committee. If you have a background in, you know, organizing and getting groups together. So like we have a lot of people that do great design work and people that are writers, for example. And so, you know, we're going to have a newsletter coming out soon. That takes work. It takes time, you know, and when you're not paid, you know, then it's out of your own passion. So I would invite people, even if you're new, you might not want to be a National Committee member, but you may, you know, as these Zoom things come out and we have these town hall discussions, you may consider being a delegate. And the delegates will obviously get together and discuss who the next National Committee will be, but there also could be other things they want to kind of talk about, you know. So like creating fundraising positions, you know, and tasking the National Committee with, you know, creating other avenues that the party can grow in. You know, so it could be anything. It's the delegates, really, the convention is where a lot of activity should occur, and even running up to it after the election, that delegates should feel empowered that they've been selected by the constituents in the different zones to, you know, lead us into the next year. So anyway, that is kind of how that's going to work. Again, we will soon have the first. I'm hoping to kind of releasing this probably for the first time, but I'm hoping to do 2 rounds through the North, South, East, and West to give delegates opportunities first to hear about the process, and then in the second time around, I would hope that all delegates kind of have you know, voiced their candidacy, so that they can discuss in a town hall format and answer questions to the voters, right? Because the voters will have to select which delegates they want. So just to kind of be clear, that'll be like 8 rounds of these more meetings. So you'll have time to kind of come to grip with what's going on there. Okay, so the next thing. The next thing is, let's see here, state and local committees. Okay, so I think a lot of people may have, I'm not sure if the people who are here have reached out to their state, like Facebook page, for example, or, to the unofficial and said, hey, how do I get on my state group or whatever? So that's a work in progress. I think as a growing party, some state groups are pretty strong. They have active leadership that when people drop in and say, hey, I'm interested in doing stuff, they can engage them and kind of give them kind of a tour, let's say, of the facilities, as it were. And other ones that we have very few people. And some of the larger, even Midwestern or Western states that have a lot of geography and not many members, we understand that it's hard to, connect with people in your own state when no one's nearby, right? You're not going to physically get together, and there might not be much going on in your state. So you got to bear with us a little bit. If you're interested in kind of getting people together, if you have friends that just want to have discussion groups physically, that's a great thing. I've suggested that, where there's not many people, just be involved, get involved in your community, try to run some community service. I think part of one of my topics is activism is coming up, but to get engaged in politics is to have that kind of, going out there and sticking your neck out kind of attitude, right? That kind of spirit. So even if you're not doing necessarily party work, you are building skills that could one day be useful in leading a local chapter, or just doing, support for candidates and so forth. So, there's stuff that you can do. One of the things that I've been trying to push is this groups.io page. And someone pointed out to me that I put a period at the end of the invitation email link, which I was just trying to end the sentence, but I realized that was confusing. So when people tried to subscribe to that, I didn't go on there today. I sent that email out yesterday to welcome people. I need to put a welcome post there. I know a lot of people have reached out and said, hey, I don't use Facebook, where the party began and used Facebook a lot. And we still do, and we've been encultured to. This is on Facebook Live right now in the voting members group. But as we grow and as we get a lot more people that aren't on Facebook, we do want a way to get consistent messaging, out to people, especially when there is some kind of activism that we can be involved in. So, I think, if you can join that, and the more we can do that, it may kind of take some time to get that going. I mean, it's just a really culture change. I mean, it's really easy to get on Facebook, and I think that kind of Pavlovian dog response of, if I put something on Facebook, people will respond. So I'm always just going to put stuff on Facebook, because when I go on groups, no one responds. I get it. I do that too. I'm not, I'm human. But I think after we get more and more people, I mean, they'll just be, I think the thing for leadership is to just consistently put information out there so that people can get it. Otherwise, there's some people out in limbo that never know what's going on. And we do want to kind of keep that, rectify that. So I want to get into a little bit on activism. Like, what can you do? That's a common thing. People join the party and they're like, well, I'm not really a politician. I've never run for office. I've never, canvassed or done any of those kind of things. And I'm kind of limited means. Like, I can't really, travel or whatever. So social media and even emails. So if we put stuff on groups, you can share emails. Facebook and Twitter. I mean, we have our Facebook page has been gaining over 100 members a week recently. And a lot of that has to do with Charlie Camosi's, defection from the pro-life Democrats. And a lot of it has to do with some of our whole life memes. Like, what does whole life mean? And I thank Shane Hoffman for helping with that. He makes some really good memes. And those have like doubled and tripled our reach for the last 2 weeks or so. And he's got several more he's made for me. So I'll be putting those out and share those things, get those out in your own circles to say, hey, not only am I pro-life, but I am whole life. I believe in human dignity from conception to natural death, and these are all the things that entails. I will start sharing those in groups. We haven't done that. Should do that, and sending out emails to the general membership also with tags, maybe like a newsletter, but just kind of where all of those are available, because you can just copy and paste them and share them, through, I don't know how Pinterest works. Some people do that, or Instagram or whatever. But to get that kind of stuff out there, the more people see what we're about, the more they know. And one of my goals for running, when Brian asked me to run as vice president, I kind of really started going into this, is I don't care if people like us or if they hate us, but I want everyone to know about us. That should be our goal. Everyone in the country, it's as easy as third-party libertarians and the Greens are. Like, they should be like, oh, there's that third party. Even if they say, oh, it's a wasted vote, it's a third-party vote, right? Who cares? At least they know that we're out here, right? They know who the libertarians and Greens are. So we kind of want to get into that rarefied air of third-party status before we, start picking at, well, I don't want to be duopoly status, I guess. That would be just as bad, but trying to breaking into a place where there's more than just two voices that are, driving the conversation. And as we've seen, they're driving a very bad, bifurcated conversation that just makes things worse in the country. So that's kind of the idea of sharing, right? Just share the message. We need your help, right? We can only share so much ourselves. If everyone, we have hundreds and hundreds of members, 10,000 plus followers. If everyone was sharing everything we did, we could quickly be known. But I was at the March for Life in Chicago. I had a booth in the convention hall, and hundreds of pro-life activists. I mean, these are people that came on a cold, snowy day in January to march in the city of Chicago, and walked by the booth, and they're very curious about why I was there. And I had, our brochures out and buttons and stuff. And they're like, I've never heard of you. This is fascinating. A whole life party. This is awesome. And I said, I know. That's why I'm here. But the fact that out of hundreds, we had one person that, oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. I saw you on Facebook or whatever. We have a lot of work to do, so we need your help to do that. More stuff. Obviously, the presidential campaign. So the Carroll campaign, the Brian Carroll for President committee, can always use more volunteers if you want to get out in your space. There are plenty of opportunities to be involved. You could be like a state leader. Some of the smaller states that have low, or not even smaller states, but the states that have lower ballot access numbers, we could use coordination help to try to get those signatures. There's a whole process of collecting signatures, verifying signatures and so forth. But only with your help can we kind of get that done. So that's a lot of opportunities in the Carroll campaign to do that. The next thing would be definitely local campaigns of pro-life candidates, but the ones that even go a little further and go whole life. So I have the opportunity to help out Representative Congressman in the U.S. House, Dan Lipinski of Illinois, and he's not my congressman. I'm not in his district, but it's actually just one district over. And I've been communicating with his field team, he's a pro-life Democrat, and he is under direct attack from his own party, and is going to be challenged in the primary by a very progressive pro-abortion challenger who is supported by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So she's really, Marie Newman is her name. And so she's been endorsed by AOC. She's going to be part of the squad if she goes to DC. And right now, Dan Lipinski's served like 4 or 5 terms in that seat as a pro-life Democrat. Very, pro-worker, has got the endorsement of several unions. Very pro-environment. He's had legislation to close down a couple of factories that were spewing some toxic chemicals into his neighborhoods. So he really lines up with a lot of our philosophies. And I've met him a couple of times and shared that with him and said, hey, you always have a home with us. But I think, if he does lose this primary, this would be, a way you show support, right? Show support, and then you never know what's going to happen. These are the relationships that could build into strong bonds that we can have, and to utilize to get to, you know, what would be like a good term for it, like working together and getting candidates out there, right? So if we run our own candidates, or if we support candidates that really follow us, we get those skills. We don't have a party full of people with these skills, and so we need to build them. Okay, so activism is a great way. So those local candidates will be huge. And then any kind of volunteering. If you have a skill that you can use, or you can help use to help us, this could be anything. So it could be media, making videos, making audio, podcasts, memes would be great, writing, editing, all great things. Okay, so reach out to admin@solidarity-party.org. You can email me. It's amar.patel@solidarity-party.org, and that'd be awesome. So that's kind of my general thing. We do have a couple more questions here. So what are the current membership numbers looking like? So voting members, I think we've just eclipsed 500 maybe the last week or so. Like, a lot of people jump in recently. On our mailing list, we have over 3,000, or almost, actually we've got over 4,000. And then the number of followers, like on Facebook, just catapulted over like 10,300 or whatever, 10,400. Brian's campaign page is well over 1,000, and we just kind of got started in November. And one of the things I would say about the Facebook, Twitter, is that you can, well, Facebook for sure, you can invite your friends to like our page, and that's like the easiest way to do it. You can just go, there's a button that says invite friends. And if you dare to do it, I encourage you to put invite friends and then select all and press send. I've done that. I've actually made more friends and done that same thing. And I have had yet to have any of my 3,000 friends complain, and send me a message, an nasty message saying, why are you inviting me to this crazy party, or anything like that. So that would be amazing to see our followers go up by hundreds. Every person that goes up, it can go up even more after that. So hopefully that answers that question. So Holly asked, what about LGBTQ issues? Like one of the things that I would say is, I would say socially, one of the things people think, well, what is that? What is the Solidarity Party generally? I want quick answers. I don't want a whole 15-minute discussion like I did at the beginning. And so I would say generally party members are socially conservative and economically liberal, to put things in the context of what people can construct in their minds, because they had to talk in those terms. But that's generally, we have a lot of people who would consider themselves progressive in general, right? Like, as the progressives would be considered, except they're very, very pro-life. So that, they're just not like, we're going to say if you, support, gay marriage, for example, that you have no place here. But I would say that the strong, position for most people is that most in the platform, for example, is that we do look to define marriage as an institution between a man and a woman. So that's where we butt grounds, I think, with the LGBTQ issues, is that we want to gain like economic access. We don't want to take away anyone's individual rights to job and so forth. But with religious freedom, which is one of the big things in our platform, one of the issues we have, and one of the ways we've kind of, I think, come to a pretty good consensus, is there's a bill that I think is out of Utah that tries to balance the rights of LGBTQ people and of religious freedom people, and that bill is really kind of puts things into a position where both sides kind of can, as far as can be, have a happy medium. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, is it's not been taken very favorably by the left. So, you know, I don't know where that leaves us, but you know, that's kind of where the party would go with that. Eric Schenkel talks about the ballot access. How are we doing? So there's several states that are very, very, very easy, Eric, to get ballot access on. Literally, you just pay $500, $1,000, and sign some paperwork, and you're on the ballot. And so those are going to be nailed down. I think we're looking at 8 to 12 states that we should be on the ballot for, officially on the ballot with a name. And then many, many others will have write-in access, depending on like county-wide, like Illinois, like I said. And then there's the asterisk states that have a larger size ballot access, but they have like a later deadline for when you can do that ballot access. And so if we get more and more and more members, and then we get more and more activist volunteers, we can get to 4,000, 5,000 ballots pretty quickly if we have the people. So it's hard to say, really, to be honest, with some of those asterisk states. There's probably people that are more specifically involved in that can answer that better. Why is the pelican on the logo? So the pelican is a traditional, you know how like the donkey is for the Democrats and the elephant is for the Republicans. The pelican is the animal for Christian democracy. So it's the historical animal that we associate with. There is a legend, from what I understand, that a mother pelican will like cut herself with her own beak and feed her own blood to nourish her children, and that is a sign, like a witness of what, you know, we are called to do, lay down our own lives for our friends, and it's called kind of the Christian democracy aspect. So we have that, and then so Jack is asking also for ballot access, and he says, is there different state to state guidance? Yeah, I mean there is, and I think, you know, as we get a little bit closer to after the primaries are kind of in full gear and we see more interest, we will probably send out some more formal, you know, documentation about where we've already gotten access, how close we are to other access, and then we'll be promoting, in like, especially as we get access in states, to raise money, and then maybe we can flipping that into other states to get more access. So, you know, like I said, I don't have my my spoon in too many pots. So I'll go to the experts for that when we get a chance. Okay. All right. Anyway, that basically concludes the questions I have. If anyone else has more questions for this time period, I just wanted to kind of give that introduction. I am recording this, and I will place it on YouTube for people to, you know, to refer people to. That when they come on, I can do like a frequently asked question that kind of put some topics up there, so that, you know, new members have a place to go to get the response. Always, though, feel free to, you know, like I said, join several, like the groups.io page, send stuff to admin, and, you know, send emails to those of us on the national committee, and we'll try to be in touch with you. Okay. Any other questions? I do appreciate all you guys coming out. I think at one point we had about 20 people. Okay. Well, that's it for now. So I'm going to try to schedule a, whoa, somebody's jumping in here. No, didn't happen. Sorry. So I'll schedule another meeting in the future, and I will see you guys then. All right. Thank you.